Olivia. Today in this paper slide video we will be learning about the Great 8 Steps of Hypothesis Testing. We use the Great 8 Steps of Hypothesis Testing to use data from a sample to make conclusions about the population. The foundation of hypothesis testing is based off of the Great 8 Steps. They are to name the test, state the assumptions, state the hypotheses, find the test statistic, draw a picture, calculate a p-value, make a decision, and write the conclusion. Now let's take a closer look at each step. The first step is to name the test. This is determined by two main things, whether the data is quantitative or categorical, and the number of groups involved. Step 2 is to state assumptions. Almost all the tests involve three conditions. The samples need to be chosen randomly, responses need to be independent, and the sample needs to be less than 10% of the population. The differences between the tests is the last condition, which are listed below. Our third step is to state the hypotheses. The hypothesis uses parameters because we are making inferences about the population. The first is the null hypothesis, which represents no change in the population. It always uses equal. The second hypothesis is the alternate hypothesis, which represents what we are showing evidence for, a change in the population. Next, we find the test statistic, which represents the number of standard errors from the population value. Depending on whether the problem is numerical or descriptive, we use Z or T. To find this value, we use our calculator. After you draw this picture, all tests except for chi-squared should have a picture of the normal curve. Depending on the alternate hypothesis, we shade accordingly. Step 6 is to find the p-value, which represents the chance with the null you obtain data that's at least as extreme. We use a calculator to find this value. Almost done. Next we make a decision. There are two options, reject or fail to reject H0. If the p-value is small, which is if it is less than the alpha value, or 0.05, we reject. If it is large, we fail to reject. Finally, we write a conclusion. This needs to be in context and state whether there is or is not enough evidence. Now let's work an example. A study by the National Athletic Trainers Association surveyed random samples of 1,679 high school freshmen and 1,366 high school seniors in Illinois. Results showed that 34 of the freshmen and 24 of the seniors have used anabolic steroids. Does the data give convincing evidence of a difference in the proportion of all Illinois high school freshmen and seniors who have used anabolic steroids? We know this is a hypothesis testing problem, so that means we have to use the Great 8. Let's start with our steps. Remember, step 1 is to name the test. Since the data is categorical, whether they use anabolic steroids, and there are two groups, freshmen and seniors, we write down on our paper we will use a 2 proportion Z test. Next, we state the assumptions. Pay attention to the normal assumption. Since there are two groups and it involves proportion, we use n times p is greater than or equal to 5, and n times 1 minus p is greater than or equal to 5. Make sure to write the statement in the bubble. Step 3 is to write down our hypotheses. First thing we need to do is label the groups. In this case, P1 is freshmen and P2 is seniors. The null hypothesis is that there is no difference between population and that they are equal to each other. Since the problem is asking if there is a difference between both proportions, the alternate hypothesis would be P1 is not equal to P2. After this, we find the test statistic using our handy calculator. The most important thing to note is that because the data is categorical, we use Z. Next, we draw a picture. This picture can also be found on the calculator. Note that it is two-sided because the alternate hypothesis uses not equal to. After this, we find the p-value. This value is very important and what we make our decision off of. We use the calculator to find it, and here it means that there is a 0.5904 chance of the null you obtain data that's at least as extreme. Now we make a decision. Since there is no alpha value stated, we use 0.05 to decide whether to accept or reject our null. So we write on our paper, since p is greater than 0.05, we fail to reject H0. The final step, all we have to do is sum up our results in context. Since we failed to reject the null, there is not enough evidence to show a difference in the proportion of all Illinois high school freshmen and seniors who have used anabolic steroids. Well, there you have it. You can now solve hypothesis testing problem. Here's an assessment problem to test your knowledge. What are the steps in the Great 8? Wait till after the creds to see if you got it right. We used our composition notebook and textbooks as resources. Ruben filmed this video, Anisha was the paper slider, and I was on voice. Olivia, obviously. The answer to the assessment question is listed here. Thank you for watching.